Hello everyone. So today I'm working on a 2009 Chevy Flex Fuel LT HHR. It has the 2.2 liter Ecotech engine. I'm going to be replacing the timing chain, the other chain that goes around the water pump, and the water pump. This is just preventative maintenance. The car has 130,000 miles on it, and everything I've read is at 150 the water pump goes out. And the chain, I figured I might as well just go in and just do it all at the same time. I'm getting ready to take the car across country from Tennessee to California, so I don't want to have any problems on that 30-hour trip, and then it'll be staying there for a few years. So first thing I do is start draining the coolant. The drain plug is on this side. You'll see the pry bar is pointed or right below it. Underneath is the little plastic tab. You have to reach up to it from underneath. Remember, you'll have to take the cap off so it starts draining. There's another drain plug underneath the water pump that uses a 13 millimeter, and even though it may not seem like you can reach it, you can reach it from here to break it loose. And that's just so that when you remove the water pump, no antifreeze will drop down into your engine oil pan, because there's a chance it might splash down in there, and I don't want to take that chance. Alright, so let me give you the parts layout of what I'm working with today. So I bought one of these kits before for a Pontiac I did with the same engine. Had really good luck with it. It's by Evergreen. You can buy just the timing kit, which will be the regular timing components, or you can get a complete kit that comes with the other chain that goes around the water pump. They both come with the tensioners. This one doesn't come with the oiler, I think, which was 15-20 bucks that I went ahead and bought to replace that. While this one comes with the sprockets, mine uses a different type of sprocket that I had to buy separate. And they call it a cam phaser, but it's still listed as a cam sprocket on the website. The same sprocket is used on intake and exhaust. The water pump will come with the standard gasket, but it doesn't come with all the smaller O-rings that you need for the pipe that goes into the back of the water pump. So I'd recommend getting the water pump mounting gasket kit so that you can get the extra gaskets. You'll have some spares, but I wouldn't worry about it. Thermostat, I strongly encourage you to replace. These have a seal, an O-ring right in here that fails, and once it fails, the engine doesn't operate at the right temperature, and your AC stops working, and sometimes other things. You'll need a valve cover gasket, since that's going to have to be removed. The timing cover gasket doesn't. Actually, that did come with it. So you need the timing cover gasket. I use thread locker when I put the bolts back in on all the tensioners, and then whiteout I just use to mark all my marks on the parts that I'm putting in, just for future reference. If I ever did have to go back into it again, I'd have all the marks easily recognizable. This is a drain plug I mentioned that's underneath the water pump. It's on the casing underneath the water pump that you'll have to break loose to finish draining it. Whenever you do replace your sprockets, you always have to replace your the bolts as well. So make sure that that they come with the bolts. And that's it. That's where I'm at for now. I'll give you an update as I'm going along. Alright, so I've got the drain cock on the radiator tightened back up, and the bolt on the bottom of the water pump case back in position, so I don't have to worry about those later. So next thing is pull this cover off, give it a good jerk, and it'll pop loose. You'll have you need a screwdriver for the clamp there, and then the clamp back here. Once you get those loose, some pliers to take this hose off. And then there's one connection right here that you'll need to break loose. The squeeze on the tab and it'll slide right out. And you get that out of the way. Now anytime you have your fuel system open, you always want to try to cover it with something. You don't want anything getting down in there. In the old days, if you dropped a bolt down your intake, you'd fry your engine the first time you went to crank it up. Alright, so the next thing is going to be to pull the valve cover off here after I disconnect all the injectors. Actually, those aren't injectors, those are the coils. And then I'll disconnect these. Yeah, that should be it. One other thing to keep in mind, I haven't done it yet, but once you get your engine on top dead center, pull your relay cover off. And on mine, it's relay number 51. If you pull this relay off, once you have everything on top dead center and you don't want the engine to crank, you get in the car and it won't do anything. So your accessories will light up, but it won't crank. Because since it's an interference engine, once you have your marks lined up, you don't want that engine to turn over for any reason. So I'll actually be putting that back in a minute so I can break the balancer bolt loose. Okay, so down here on the bottom, you'll see I jacked the car up fairly high so that I won't have to be bending over as far. Since I'm 6'2", it tends to hurt my back when I'm bending over a car. Also have my protective old socks on the arms to keep them from getting all scraped up and also from getting all greasy. Once you get the wheel off, if you have if you have one of these door tools, you can use that to pry these clips up. So once you pry them up a little bit, then you slide the whole clip out. If you don't have that, it's a little harder, but you can get up underneath there with a screwdriver as well. Let's see, there was 3 7mm bolts, one here, and then a couple more underneath that had to come off. And now this cover is ready to pull out of there. Kind of maneuver it a little bit. So it actually connects up there. I'm not worried about that. I just need to have space to work here. So now I can get to what I need here. That's interesting. It looks like I've had some kind of leak here. Looks like it may have been the water pump that was leaking. So probably a good thing that I'm in here replacing that. So I'm going to use the method that David Mirza shows on his video. I try to put a link on there where you put a socket on a breaker bar and it'll rest up against the control arm, and then you crank the engine, and when you crank the engine, because of the way the engine turns, it'll break it loose. And so that way you don't have to have an impact wrench or anything like that. I'll have to figure out how I tighten that back up later. I know he uses a 1/2" impact on his. That's where I'm at for now. Alright, so I'll put my relay back in so it'll crank. I'm going to show you how this breaks this crank bolt loose with, I'm using a breaker bar, a torque wrench, since I don't have a long breaker bar. That's it. That's all it took. Yep, so it's loose now. So I think I do remember, no. So that's all for now. Alright, so let's see if this little trick works that David Mears has suggested, where you put tissue down in the number 1 cylinder. I didn't remove the other spark plugs because I don't want any crud getting down in there. But so at this point you just crank it over to get it up on top dead center. Okay, so you see it just shot it out right then and there. So when it shoots it out, if you put a screwdriver down inside there, yeah, your piston is up. It's all the way up. So now I'm ready to remove the valve cover. Again, if you have one of these tools, it makes it easier to pop these little plastic clips off so they don't break. Loosen up all your bolts. They're all around the outer edge. They're all 10 millimeter. Take this bracket off here on the back of the valve cover. You have to loosen up the bracket on the back here so you can clear the valve cover. These coils are fairly well positioned in that loom to where you shouldn't mix them up. Right now I just have them hanging over the edge, with exception of this first one that I removed. And then also on this one I did mark it to make sure I put it back on the same one, but looking at this loom, it's the same way. It's situated where you shouldn't mix up the 2 connections. Pretty much at that point then, I put my pry bar up underneath here, this point right here, tapped it with a hammer, and it popped it loose. So at this point, the valve cover is loose and ready to come off. And I'll go ahead and verify the top dead center. I may need to move it a little bit using rotating the crank by hand, the crankshaft. And once I've got everything lined up, then again, as I mentioned before, I'll pull out the relay to make sure that it can't be cranked up, and then disconnect my remote start. Make sure I don't accidentally push that, and then we should be good to go. More to come. Alright, so be sure that you have a jack with a block of wood to hold the engine up. You'll need to pull the reservoir out to give you space to get to be able to remove the mount. So the reservoir's right here, 10 millimeter bolts holding that on. The mount, you've got 2 18 millimeter nuts, 3 15 millimeter bolts. Once you pull this out, then you have to pull the bracket off. So the bracket's got 3 18 millimeter bolts. You use wrenches on that because you can't get a socket on it. Once you get that out, if you have a serpentine tool, you can release the tension on the belt tensioner to get the belt off. If you don't, then you have to do what I did, is just take the main bolt out and then work this out. It's kind of tricky to get it out of there. You have to kind of work it to an angle to get the bolt out first, and then turn it to pull that back out. So once that's done, we're at the next step, which is to remove the balancer, the crankshaft balancer, and then I'm going to start with the bottom timing cover. I'm going to pull that off and then go from there. Alright, so if you look at the new timing chain, you'll see that 3 of the links are a different color. The old chain is the same way. I went ahead and marked them with the white out. So once this is at top dead center, you've got the 4th link up on this side, and the same thing on this side. If you count up, it's the 4th link up as well. If you look down at where I have the marks on the balancer and on the timing cover, there's a little line, so that's lined up. And then if you look up underneath here, you'll see that the notch on the balancer is in the 12 o'clock position. So now I'm ready to pull that timing cover off, and along with that, all the little 10 millimeter bolts, there's going to be a 13 millimeter water pump bolt that holds the water pump from this side. It's going to come out, and this cover will come off next. If I remember correctly, it's going to leak oil when I pull it off, so I'll have to have a drain pan here. Alright, so 10 bolts you should have removed all the way around, plus the one for the water pump, and it's pretty much ready to pry off. Let's see what this does. Well, thought that would pry off a little bit easier. There it goes. Here comes oil. So you see, I didn't have to remove these four. Those are only when you're replacing the water pump without messing with the timing chain. You have to have a special tool to go through there to hold the gears in place while you remove the water pump. Alright, let me get that off and then I'll start checking the marks. Alright, so my marks are lined up on my tooth down here and my chain, on the timing chain. I tried to get the other two marks on the other chain to line up. Tried turning the engine over and it didn't work out, so I'm just going to make sure that when I put the new chain back on that the arrows are pointing at the marks on each one of the two sprockets. But that'll be after I replace the water pump. On the top, so up here 15/16 to hold the camshaft, and I did have to use a socket, 18mm socket, to break the bolts loose on each one of the sprockets. On the back tensioner, it's back here in the back, even though it doesn't look like you have space, you can get a 1 1/4 inch socket, I think it's 22mm, on it, and use a breaker bar to break it loose. And then this plug here uses a 10mm Allen to take that out. That'll need to come off to start taking the tensioners off, or the guides off for each one of the on each side of the timing chain. Alright, so the old timing tensioner obviously is sprung. There's a Cloy's video that shows you how to remove that snap ring and take this out to get it back in if you were going to reuse that, which they recommend you change it. So here's the new one. It's not sprung yet. That'll get sprung once everything's back together, and I'll show you how to do that when the time comes. Alright, so if I remember correctly, these sprockets or the cams will move once the chain pressure is off. So I've got some vice grips on either end to try to hold them in place, or at least to know where they were for when I put everything back together again. This bolt, like I said, once you get that 10mm Allen head out, it came out a second ago, you may need a magnet to get it out. That's what holds one of the guides in place. The other two bolts, here's this one for the guide on the right, and this is the only one that holds this in. This is supposed to come out from the top, but I have a feeling, yeah, it's got to go up through the top. So as you'll see, all your tension is still on this side, which it should be when you put the new chain back on. All your slack should be on the on this side, where the tensioner is going to put pressure on it once you deactivate it. But that's where I'm at for now. I'll go and pull those guides out and go from there. Alright, so I just removed the two 10mm bolts on this guide up here. The bolts are out for the sprockets. The sprocket comes off. Once you get the left sprocket out, I'd already removed this. The guide came out from the top. It wouldn't come out from the bottom. And then the right sprocket comes off. When you go to pull the chain up, there's a little pin that sticks out in this cover. So you've got to push it in towards the engine to get it around that, and the chain comes right out. Alright, so that's it on that timing chain. Now I need to pull the other chain off. Alright, so now what you've got here from the bottom, before I take it apart, you'll see that the crank gear has a mark there that lines up with a mark on the block. On your right sprocket for your other chain, there's an arrow that points up to the 12 o'clock position. That will line up with the new link on the new chain. On the left sprocket, it's at the 6 o'clock position, the arrow that points down to that link. You can't move those when you put the new chain on because it throws the engine off balance. So I'm going to go ahead and change the oil lube piece there. Change all the guides, and then once I've done that, and change the little sprockets. Once I've done that, and these sprockets as well, then I'll remove the tensioner. And actually, I'm gonna have to start with a tensioner, so I'll be able to work with everything. But I'll wait on putting the new tensioner in until I get the new water pump in there. Alright, so I did have to remove all the guides and the tensioner to get the chain off. There's a Cloy's video that shows the way you remove these sprockets. There's a hole back here, and you're supposed to use a punch or something to hold it in the teeth and then turn your bolt. I cannot break either one of those loose. They want to keep turning because I can't get the punch in there at the right angle to do that. So just like I did the last time I did this repair, I'm going to have to reuse those gears. I did get the new gears down here in, and I've got them marked already with all the marks that I need. So now it's on to the water pump, which has a tube coming in from the back that has to be disconnected over by the thermostat. And then there's just two bolts, if I remember correctly, that actually hold it in place, aside from the third one that comes in from the front. So that's where I'm at. Alright, so unfortunately, the hardest part yet, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a good shot of it. I'll try. So there's a tube that goes underneath the exhaust manifold that plugs into the back of the reticle. Last time I did this, I disconnected the heater hoses, and they were just a royal pain to get off, so I decided to just leave the hoses on there. The tube comes up to the assembly where the thermostat goes, and there's actually an O-ring on either side of the tubes. The assembly is held on by 3 bolts, 2 short ones and a long one, but unfortunately to get to one of the short ones you have to take out the coolant sensor. 19mm wrench is what you have to use to get that off, and so you're kind of working blind when you're pulling all that off underneath there. But once you get that tube out of the way, I think I'm going to have to get to the the two water pump bolts from underneath, if I remember correctly. Alright, so here's the tube I was talking about. I was able to pull it loose, and so it's going to come out. These are the two O-rings I mentioned that are in the water pump gasket kit. I'll replace those. And now I've got to get to the two bolts that are back here behind the water pump from underneath to break that loose and take the water pump out. Alright, this is the reason I make these videos, so y'all don't make the same mistakes that I do. So there are only two bolts on the back of the water pump, but there's actually two on the front. There's the one that went through the cover, and there's this one right here. I was trying to hit on it with a hammer, and it was not coming loose. So I had to go back and look at my notes here, and it says down here, remove two front bolts. So the one sits up above the timing cover, and that's one I'm loosening up now. Once I get that off, that housing is going to come right off. Alright, so as I said, came right out. So here is the water pump housing. Now I'm going to take off this back cover to go ahead and replace the water pump. This is where the tube goes that I mentioned before. It's got to slide in there, so there really isn't a notch cut out in here. It just slides in flush, and it just has to bottom out. And the same thing on the other side as well. I'll probably put a little bit of lube, antifreeze or something on the O-ring so it'll slide a little bit easier. Alright, so once you get the plate off the water pump, remember to change the O-ring around here. Also, when you take it apart, there's this little sleeve that comes out of the old water pump. Just put it in the new one. Aside from that, there's nothing else to the pump. The new water pump has a new O-ring on it already. All I have to do is put the old gear back on. And those bolts were snug. They weren't super tight or anything like that. Alright, the water pump is back in. Now, I got the tube in the back of the water pump. Now I've got to get it on the other end, but the plate that has the 3 bolts that hold it in that I showed earlier, along with the sensor, has a rectangle looking O-ring. It's actually this one right here that has the ridges, so it comes around, but you have to fit it into that the rectangle spot before you mount that back to the engine. So that'll have to be done after the tube is put in. So let's see how this turns out. Alright, having a heck of a time getting the thermostat housing bolts to line up. So I think what I did, I don't remember which way this pipe was when I took it out. When I put it back in, I put it in this way. I'm going to try to put it in this way now, to where the bend is at the top, because the other way the housing just won't line up correctly. So I'll let you know if that works. Alright, so just suggestion, I worked on this most of the day yesterday, and when I was trying to get that tube back into the housing, I started getting a little frustrated. That was the only point during the day where I got frustrated, other than when I was trying to remove it. So sometimes it's best just to take a shower, rest a little, get up the next day and give it another shot. So I did that this morning. It did turn out that that tube was in there upside down. So remember, the bend will need to be towards the top when you put it back in, and pay attention to which side goes towards the water pump as well. Now, when I was trying to get this O-ring, this little rectangle O-ring, the ridged one that comes in the water pump gasket set, out of the other housing, it was a little bit of a bear. Fortunately, I had a little pry tool that I use to get up underneath the seal. you do need to replace that, because you'll see when you pull it out it's flat, and you want to make sure that the new one is in there to seal tightly. Once I got the old one out, the new one fit in just pretty easily. I've set a mirror down here to try to show you where the bolts are. So I've got them all in white. So you've got one up here, which is the one behind the sensor, and then one down below, down there, right above that little connector. So those are the three I was trying to get back in. So again, once I got the tube in, then the housing lined up just fine. And so now I am going to put the sensor in and go from there. If you have a mirror that you can set back there, I'd recommend it. If I use the sight mirror, this little sight mirror, when I was trying to get it back in last night, and that's when I figured out this stuff wasn't lining up. And you'll see one of the disadvantages of jacking it up is I can't reach down there. So even with my arm length, I can't reach down there, so I had to get a brick to stand on. Just whatever you stand on, just make sure it's something steady, because in my experience, things you use to stand on typically fall over, so just be careful doing that. Alright, so the other reason I had to stop last night is I needed a torque wrench that measures in inches. This is a 1/4 inch torque wrench that Harbor Freight has for $19.99. Of course, then you get your 20% discount. So all the guides on the timing chain are going to go in at 89 inch-pounds, and then I also use the thread locker. I'm using the green, that's for light duty, and that showed in the instructions that you're supposed to use some kind of sealer. I couldn't find the one that they recommended. One other thing, when I was putting the thermostat housing in there, if you have some type of ratchet, small ratchet that you can use, it's going to make it a whole lot easier to put those bolts in. These also come in a set of 3, 1/4 inch, 3/8 and a 1/2 inch at Harbor Freight. Definitely worth the investment. They're a little big, but they did the trick for what I needed back there, because if you're trying to use a ratchet, it might have been a little harder to get those bolts started. Alright, so I've got the chain on. You'll see the black tabs on the chain. The bottom one's lined up there. I put this guide in just to show you how the right sprocket is lined up at 12 o'clock. The left sprocket is lined up at 6 o'clock on the bottom. The water pump has no marks on it. It doesn't matter how that's turned. So now I'm ready to go ahead and put the guides in. Not sure what happened, but when I originally put these 2 guides in, I couldn't get that 3rd guide in and could never have gotten the tensioner in there. So I pulled the chain back off to check it against the old chain, and the number of links were the exact same as the old one. Put it back on, and this time I put this guide in first, put the tensioner in, then put these 2 guides in. All the bolts are still loose, and now the chain's okay. So I don't know, maybe it was on the water pump wrong or what. The reason you want to torque these guides down to 89 inch-pounds is because these actually move the guides, and if they don't move, your chain will probably wear out quicker, or the guides might wear out. You don't torque the little oiler to 89, that's just snug, you don't have to torque the tensioner to 89 either. It's just the other ones, and you'll see when you torque it down, it's still pretty tight. Alright, so go ahead and put in your new guide. This is where the tensioner is going to ride there, but slip it down in through the top. Once you do that, work your timing chain in. And remember, you've got that piece that protrudes on the timing or on the engine case, so you have to push the timing chain over that end to get it to come over that. Go ahead and put your sprocket in and line up your new little tab there on the sprocket. The sprocket can only go on one way, and these two sprockets are interchangeable. Once you've got that done, then you come down here and put your chain on there and check your link as well. Make sure it's lined up. You won't have a lot of flexibility on this side because that's where your other guide is going to go in after you've put the other sprocket in. All your flexibility on this side will be on this side. So you can move this lever around. That guide, you can move it around to go ahead and get your chain in along the bottom here and make sure it's positioned correctly. So then you'll put the other cam sprocket in and torque them down and go on and put on the last timing guide. I'm not sure why, but first time I put the chain on, all the tension or the slack was on this side. So I had to take this tensioner loose and then go ahead and realign the chain again, make sure everything was lined up on the marks. Had to take that left sprocket off to do all that. And then what I did is I went ahead and lined everything up, put this guide in, snugged it down, and then went ahead and put the left sprocket back on. And then once I did that, then the slack was on the left side here, the way it's supposed to be. Remember that these will also be torqued at the 89 inch-pounds since this moves as well. And then don't forget your plug for the bolt on the top tensioner. I don't have the sealer that they recommend, so I just use Teflon tape on that. One other thing I found on the guide, so the original guide has a little cutout that the valve cover sits around, that the seal for the valve cover sits around. The new one did not. So as I was saying, since the new one doesn't have the cutout there, I'm just going to reuse the old one. And then all I did is I took the little plastic piece and put it on the old one, since that's the only thing I need to worry about. That's the new piece. That's where I'm at for now. Alright, so I put the tensioner in. I think I'd said 22 millimeter before. I think it's actually 32 millimeter is the size. I used a 1 1/4 inch socket to get it in there. Remember to torque down your cam sprockets, and they're torqued to 22 foot-pounds plus 100 degrees. So 100 degrees is approximately a little bit more than 1/4 of a turn that you would turn it once you get to the 22 foot-pounds. To release the tension on the sprocket, I've seen people use like extensions, 3/8 drive extensions. I've got this pry bar here that I was able to work down in here. And then once I had it basically resting on the chain, which is on the guide, I tapped it with a hammer here, and that released the tensioner. So if you look underneath, you'll see that now this has tension on it. So there's no more slack where there was before, and this has all the tension it needs. So that's it. Pretty much ready to put the this timing cover back on, and then the valve cover back on after that. Should be it for a little bit before I need to let you know anything else. Alright, so got all the surfaces cleaned up for the timing cover gasket. I'm not going to mess with this one since I didn't have to do anything with it. Used this tool to take the old seal off, and I'll use the old seal to tap the new seal in there so the bottom's out. Make sure I have that right. Yep. Alright, that's good to go. Alright, so I know this probably isn't a good idea, but I use this pry bar to put in right here between the pulley and the to be able to torque down the crankshaft bolt. It's only the 74 foot-pounds, so it torqued down fairly easy. It didn't put that much pressure on the case. Alright, so this is all together down here. I'm going to go ahead and put the tensioner back in place. And then, actually I'll probably do the valve cover first to go ahead and crank it up, make sure. Alright, so when you're doing the valve cover, make sure you change out all the grommets. The grommets here are the same as the ones on the valve covers. So these, just slip them down and then pry them off. Some pliers like that. Put the new one on. That's good to go. Once you snap the valve cover bolts out, same thing. Just run these to the bottom and pry them off. And then slip the new one on the same way. That's it. So this piece actually won't come off of the valve cover bolt, it stays in place. So just snap that back in. That way it'll hold it in place. Alright, now remember when you're tightening down the valve cover bolts, you should crisscross as you're doing them, but you also want to go ahead and install the coils, because those need to be torqued down along with the valve cover bolts. So you'll be crisscrossing and torquing these down as well to make sure you get a nice even setting of the gasket. Alright, so I had to rent a Serpentine tool, but unfortunately this end is at the wrong angle and it doesn't have any other adapters to be able to use it. I had to replace the tensioner while I was here, belt tensioner, because the pulley was going bad. So what I ended up doing is I improvised with a pipe wrench. So if you use a pipe wrench and grab onto the back and pull towards the car, then that'll also release the tension on the belt. So worst case scenario, in case you don't have that 3/8 breaker bar, which is what you need, since you can't fit a ratchet down in there unless it's a real narrow head ratchet. Alright, so since I needed the mount in place when I cranked the engine up, I went ahead and took care of all that, put all that back together, set the intake or the air filter housing on there, connected the sensor underneath, and it is ready to attempt to crank. I put the relay back in the relay box. So let's see what it does. Okay, good news. Cranked right up the first time. Had a little bit of noise when it first cranked up, but it's just because everything was dry when the oil drained out of the oil pan. But it looks like it's running good. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut it off. And go ahead and replace the thermostat. I need to flush the coolant out. I noticed rust in the cooling system, which is never good. So I'm going to flush that out real good. Once I pull the thermostat out, I'm going to run the hose through both sides, see which way it goes through. It'll probably come back through the radiator is the way it's going to need to flow, and then come out at the tube coming out of the water pump. And then once I have that all flush, then I'll put in the new Dexcool, and it's got to be a 50-50 mix of Dexcool and water. Alright, so I got the 2 bolts out for the thermostat water outlet. Remember, the thermostat always points towards the radiator, so the water flows that way. So I'm going to put the water hose into that radiator hose, remove the thermostat, and let the old coolant come out of the system while the engine's running. Remember, the reason I replace these thermostats anytime I'm in here doing any work is they have an O-ring in the center that fails, and when it does, the engine doesn't operate at the right temperature and your AC quits working. Sometimes other stuff quits as well. That's where I'm at. Everything else except for the air cleaner is on, and I'm about ready to go.